Yo, what's up guys? Blake here bringing you a new video today. Today I'm going to be talking about the changes that are coming to PvP as a whole. So the biggest thing that's coming to the game is turn-based, but there are also some other changes and just how cards are going to be balanced, stuff like that. So I just wanted to make a video dedicated to opening that kind of discussion, seeing what you guys have to say, and explaining the changes that are coming to the game. Shrike has changed as a card. Now, the biggest part that's changed about it is how the Backlash works, because the card itself works the same in a sense. So what's changed about it is shadow spells no longer double reduce backlash. What that means is, for example, if you use an iceberg, currently how the game works now is if you use the iceberg, it would double reduce your backlash because you hit and you bladed, which are technically two things that the Shrike likes and would double reduce the backlash. In the new update that's coming, an iceberg would only decrease your backlash by 10%. So any hit or any blade, any offensive move will only decrease your backlash by 10%, which means that there is now only one way to get your backlash down to 0. In addition to that, Shadow Spell's backlash has been adjusted in starting value and now caps at 70%. So what that means basically is that when you go into Shrike mode, you're going to start at 40% backlash. 40%, not 30. So because you can't double reduce your backlash with cards, the only way to fully reduce your backlash now is by using these two spells, Daybreaker and Nightbringer. The last change that was made to Shrike is that the backlash now caps at 70%. So let's say for some reason you went into Shrike and you shielded every single turn. You Shriked and triple tower shielded. Your backlash would go all the way up to 70%, which is insane. I really like how there's no cap, because a lot of the times a good strategy would be to Shrike and then shield. Because Shrike is such a power card, I think these changes are good overall. Obviously, we're going to need to see what happens, you know? It's easy to say, oh, this looks good on paper, but when it comes to the actual game, it's a different story. I'm definitely excited to test out these new changes. I would love to do more testing in test run, but unfortunately, there's just not enough people. Every day I hop onto test run, every day I check the queue, and it's dead. I really think that KI needs to implement just a simple reward system. It wouldn't be that hard. It could be in-game rewards, whether it be tickets or exclusive items, whatever it is. It could be really simple, such as, you know, do 5 PvP matches, you get this reward, do 10 this reward, 25, 50 these rewards. So I really think they need to implement that, because there hasn't been enough data collected on how turn-based is going to work with the current meta. So those are the changes that they posted on the test realm update notes basically, but there are also some additional changes to the game that I'll be getting into detail now. So one of the biggest changes that they're doing to the game, and this is not 100% confirmed, so I could be wrong, but I'm telling you, Matt Netta came to the stream earlier and has basically heavily hinted that Fire Beetle is going to be no PvP. Fire Beetle will be able to be used in the regular world, but in PvP, you cannot use Fire Beetle TC. So these beautiful TC that you see right here, Fire Beetle will be no PvP. You can still use pet cards. So for example, if I were to equip my Scary Annette here, and you have the pet card, this will still be usable. So you can still have one Fire Beetle as a fire, which I think is pretty interesting. And I'm going to go and explain, you know, the pros and cons. So I agree, fire is a very good school at max. It has been for a very long time. And I agree that Fire Beetle is absolutely broken, especially in turn-based. For 2 pips, you can take off a shield and put 3 traps that are 35. So it's better than the regular fuel. It's basically a potent fuel, and it does damage for 2 pips. It's pretty insane. So I agree that Fire Beetle needed to be nerfed how it was. Now, do I think it should be completely banned from PvP? Of course, I might be biased because I'm a fire, but I don't think that banning it was the solution when you leave cards like Icebird still in the game. I mean, how can you know what I mean? Like, I understand that fire is a broken school, but can we talk about the elephant in the room? Ice is absolutely, by far, hands down, without a doubt, the single most dominant school at max level, because of the stats and also the cards. So the fact that they wouldn't change Icebird, but they're gonna completely make Beetle no PvP is, I think, unfair. Not to go and defend fire and say, oh, fire needs to be buffed. I think that a better solution would have been to nerf Beetle first before banning it completely. So what they could have done is, you know, make it 3 pips, for example, or keep it 2 pips but make it 1 trap, or make it, you know, the same 2 traps instead, but they're like 20 traps instead of 35. I think they could have done a lot of different changes first instead of just making it no PvP, but I do understand that Beetle would have been way too broken in its current state in turn-based. So I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with it completely just because they're not doing it universal across the board. Every school except basically Balance and Fire have a 2-pip hit TC that they can use. Ice has Icebird. Storm has Storm Beetle, Myth has the Troll, Life has the Scarab, and Death has the Scarab too. So with this change, Fire and Balance will be the only 2 schools that don't have a 2-pip treasure card that takes off a shield and has a buff. So obviously, like I said, you can still use the Fire Beetle from your pet, but it's only 1 card. It's only 1 card, and obviously that's much more counterable, especially in turn-based. So is it the end of the world for Fires? Are we doomed now because Fire Beetle is going to be no PvP? Absolutely not. We still have cards like Fire Elf. Now, me personally, I hate packing hits in my main deck. It's just not my playstyle. I absolutely hate it, but we're going to have to learn to adapt as Fire Wizards, because the only alternative is packing Link. And Link is not a bad card, and it's nice that you can make it TC, but the damage output is just so much worse. It's absolutely, I mean, they're not even a comparison. I mean, look at this. I mean, you guys see this, the damage for Fire Elf is just so much more. You get 70 more for the first hit, but you get 60 more for the second hit as well. That's 130 damage that you're missing out for the same pips. So, yes, you can make Link TC. I don't know if they're going to eventually take it out of the game, but it's going to be difficult. So, Fire Elf is a very good card, and a 2-pip dot in turn-based that does good damage is going to be huge. So, we'll see how it goes. Overall, I think taking Beetle out of the game might be a little bit too extreme when you're not going to nerf cards like Icebird, but I think it is a step in the right direction, and I do agree that Fire Beetle is too overpowered as it stands. So it makes sense. I support it. I think that they might want to look at it again if they're not going to nerf cards like Icebirds or, you know, the other schools 2-pip attacks, TCs that do, you know, a hit and a buff. And you can still have 1 Fire Beetle from your pet. So obviously you can't use it in Shrike to reduce your backlash and to get a Pierce Blade, because Shrike is only affected by your cards, not your pet cards. We'll see what happens. So the last major change that's coming to the test realm is how cards like Lord of Winter and Mana Burn work. For example, Lord of Winter, how it worked in the past is it would do, you know, the normal damage, and then it would take away 3 pips from the target. If they were all white pips, it would take away all white pips. If the target only had regular new pips, the white pips, it would take away the new pips. For example, they had, you know, 5 power pips and 1 regular pip, it would take away 1 regular pip and 2 power pips for a total of 5 pips, which would make cards like Lord of Winter have great value, especially in turn-based. You know, imagine your opponent strikes, you know they're gonna go for a combo, and you go for a Mana Burn or a Lord of Winter, which completely cancels out their combo and forces them to restart. I mean, cards like this have so much value, so it makes sense that they were nerfed. Mana Burn, on the other hand, has been completely nerfed. I think maybe even too much, but what it does now is, what it used to do is for 5 pips, it takes 5 pips, and it takes pretty much exactly 5 pips, sometimes even 6. If you only had power pips, it would take away 3 pips. So it would take away 3 power pips, which would convert into 6 pips, which is huge. Which is why Mana Burn was such a powerful card, but and Balance such a powerful school, to be honest. But in turn-based, when you know exactly what your opponent has done, they needed to nerf it. So I agree that Mana Burn absolutely needed to be nerfed. I know a lot of people aren't happy about it, especially the Balance Wizards out there, especially after lore got nerfed. But I mean, it's too good. As it was, it's way too good, and it needed to be nerfed. Now, to be nerfed to 3 pips, which is what it is now, which essentially is, let's say your opponent has all power pips, right? Let's say they have 6 power pips, okay? They have 6 power pips. If you Mana Burn them, it will do exactly the same damage, 80 per pip, but it will only take away 3 pips total. So it would take away 2 of your power pips and give you 1 regular pip back, for a total of 3 pips being gone. So I agree that I think, like a lot of players have been saying, it might be a little bit too obtrusive on Balance, taking away such a value card that they have. You know, Mana Burn is part of Balance's core. On the other hand, I can see how overpowered it was before, and I think it absolutely needed a nerf. So I don't know if taking away 3 pips is the solution. Maybe they should make it 4, but I think something that Balance, a lot of Balances who I've talked to don't realize is that it's still a good card. Just because you can't spam it doesn't mean you can't use it to your advantage. If your opponent is going for a combo, you might know what that combo is. For example, let's say you're going against a Fire and they Shrike, and you know they want to go in for an E-Free into Scorch or something like that. You Mana Burn them, and now they are instantly incapable of going for that combo, which could save you. So I don't think Mana Burn is going to be absolutely obsolete now, but I do think that it might have been nerfed a little bit too much. So I think that's most of the changes that are coming to the game as of right now. I wanted to talk about turn-based now just in general and basically explain to you how I feel about it, the pros and the cons, and where I'm standing. Personally, in my opinion, I do not think that turn-based is the solution to combating the disadvantage of going second as the game stands right now. So a lot of people think it's good, a lot of people think it's bad. I think that turn-based creates a gameplay that is just too simplistic, procedural, and formulaic. And what I mean by that is that the variety that usually comes from games, because you have to predict and analyze what your opponent is going to do regardless of whether you're first or second, is gone in a sense. In turn-based, it's just reacting. Of course, you might have to predict, oh, what is my opponent going to do in 2 turns? What are they going to do in 3 turns? What's their strategy? What's their game plan? Yes, of course, that still exists. But with turn-based, it's only reacting. If you're open, you put a shield up. If they're open, you go for the hit. You know, if they have shields up, you might go for a dot or use a card like Iceberg that will give you a blade and take off their shield. So I think that turn-based just makes it where it kind of dumbs the game down in a sense. And I understand the argument that it's more fair, because from second you are at a disadvantage, but it also creates the necessity to pull exactly what you need on the exact turn. So here's an example, right? With the current system, let's say that you're first. It's a fire versus fire matchup, okay? And you have a 90 weakness on you from an Ifrit. You're wide open. You don't have any shields on you. And your opponent has a Shad. They have 5 pips and a Shad. You're going to have to think, what is my opponent going to do this turn? Are they going to go for the FFA? Do I shield this turn? Or are they going to go for a beetle thinking that I'm going to shield and therefore get more damage for their next hits, and maybe even get another Shad where they could go for a Shrike into a hit? So people that think that you only have to predict from second, that's not true. Obviously, it is more consequential if you mispredict from second, because then your opponent who's going first will know exactly if they have an open hit or not. But you still need to predict and analyze from first and from second. So I think that turn-based completely eradicates that from the game. There is no need to analyze. There is no need to predict what your opponent is going to do and how to react. It's just react exactly from what they're doing. In my opinion, I think that's a huge part of the core of Wiz PvP and why I think it's such an exciting and entertaining game to play. It's because you never know what your opponent will do and you have to make choices when you're predicting. So I do understand that going second, especially in this meta, is a huge disadvantage. I'm fully aware of that, and I do think it's a problem, but I think what a lot of people disagree on is the root of the problem. I personally think that the root of the problem is the gear balancing and Shads, and some cards like, for example, the Pot Boiler cards, which are absolutely insanely overpowered, and will be even more overpowered in turn-based, because you guarantee the value every single time. But I think that the root of the problem is Shads and just the gear balancing with how it is now. You have Isis who can get 85 resist with ward and 10k health and still do decent damage and still crit, which is insane. You get, you know, schools like Fire, which can have insanely high damage output and just spam beetle every single round. I've been doing PvP in Wiz for a very long time now. I've done PvP since first age, and I've loved PvP, but I have noticed that as time has gone by, being second has become more of a disadvantage. I don't know if you guys were there back in the day, but back in first age and part of second age, going second really wasn't a disadvantage. Of course, yes, going first will always inherently have a slight advantage, but back then it wasn't a huge deal. You know, you went second, you could still win the game if you outplayed your opponent and if you played right, you know. But now, because of how powerful Shads are and certain cards in the game, it's much more difficult to win from second, and that's why, you know, sometimes you see, oh, I'm second to an Ice, or oh, I'm second to a Fire, it's just game over. And I agree that that's horrible and that should never be the case. But in my opinion, I think that the root of the problem are shadows, just shadow hits, shadow spells, how they work in general with the RNG, and just how some of the gear balancing and certain spells, like I said, the Pot Boiler cards, basically all the spells that do double value. So they're basically a hit with a utility. I think those cards also are a part of why the current meta is very unbalanced. So I do understand people's argument that turn-based is good for the community, but in my opinion, I think that turn-based just basically puts a handicap on everybody. It just dumbs the game down, and it also requires you more than ever, with this meta especially, but more than ever, you need to pull the exact card on the exact turn. If you don't have a shield ready, when your opponent is with a Shad and ready to hit you, that's just game over. And I know a lot of people have said that turn-based is good for new players, it's going to promote more people to play PvP, but I disagree. I think that turn-based is actually more difficult in the sense that in deck building is even more important than ever. There is no room for error. You need to pull the exact card on the exact turn or you will just lose the game. So I think that turn-based is actually more difficult for new players who aren't used to deck building and understanding the meta of the game and how it works. So I think that's another major problem. Another major problem that I have with turn-based is that it's going to give a huge advantage to resist and shield spamming strategies, basically. If you're in turn-based, you never have to predict anything that your opponent is going to do. You can brace the moment that they Shrike, you can spam shields every single turn and then just heal after. And while I agree that healing has been basically neglected, especially at high level, you know, you don't see life healing at high level, and I think that's a major problem. I think healing is a cool part of the game that was definitely neglected recently, and especially with shads and all of that. I think turn-based will create this strategy that's already existed in the game, but will give it even more of an advantage that you can just shield spam every turn. So I think schools like Ice are going to heavily benefit from turn-based. I think jading strategies, healing strategies are going to benefit as well, and that's not necessarily a problem, but you don't want to play in a game where everybody's sole purpose and objective of winning the game is to just, you know, spam shields and heals until the opponent has run out of cards or has just, you know, is fed up with it and flees, right? So obviously this is a problem even in the main game, but I think it's more of a problem in turn-based, and I think we will see that, especially if no changes come to light. This is also a major problem for low-level PvP. Take, for example, Legendary and Grand PvP, which is already infested with these kind of playstyles. Obviously, they don't just fully Jade, but they go with, you know, warded pets, and the moment you infoul, you don't have means of pierce like Shrike does, right, at those lower levels. So the moment that you infoul, whether it be from your pet or whether it be you casting it, the moment that you infoul, your opponent is going to cast a brace. And if they're warded with 70 plus resist and they cancel out your infoul with a fortify, good luck doing a thing to them. They will shield every single turn while you're in infoul, and as soon as your infoul goes up, they will just heal right back to full. So I think that low PvP is going to be pretty much dead with turn-based if nothing else changes about the game, if there aren't resist caps that are added, all that stuff. I think that low PvP pretty much just die out because it'll just be people jading and just, you know, having ward and insane resist and shield spamming and healing. I do believe that turn-based has the potential to be really good and work well, even though I prefer the current system as flawed as it is. I do believe that turn-based can be what is best for the PvP community if they make the necessary changes, and that's a lot of things that they need to change. They need to change how some TC work. For example, all of the pot boiler cards. They need to change how Maycast work. For example, Maycast Shatter is absolutely broken in turn-based. I mean, absolutely broken. How it is now is that your pet's Maycast can cast on either person's turn, on your turn or on theirs. And this morning, I played a tournament with my man Chris, and you know what happened? I was doing pretty well. I was winning the game. I was playing very well. I had absolutely the upper hand. I went for a shield during my turn, and his pet cast Shatter. So when it was time for him to pick a spell, he knew I was wide open, and I managed to end up winning the game, but barely. I think I survived with like 400 health, but it's crazy how overpowered Maycast are already in the system, as broken as they are, but in turn-based they will be even more broken. So I think the first step that should happen right away immediately is that Maycast should only be able to occur on your turn. So that means if your opponent shields, your pet should not be able to cast Shatter. Your pet should not be able to cast Enfeeble on your opponent's turn. It should only be able to cast on your turn. And on top of that, I don't think that some Maycasts should be even allowed in PvP. I think that Maycasts are already so broken as they are. They're literally a free turn. They're a free turn that can win you the game, and it's entirely RNG based. So I think that Maycasts as a whole in PvP are just bad and detrimental to the game. I think it adds too much RNG. It's way too unfair, and you can lose matches because of ridiculous things like that. So I think that Maycasts definitely need to be heavily looked at, if not just completely removed from PvP. The biggest example, like I said, is Maycast Shatter. Absolutely insane because of what it does. If you think that, okay, I'm gonna protect myself this turn, but then your opponent's pet casts Shatter on your turn, and now it's turn-based, so they know what they can do, and they can just take the open hit, it's over. It's game over, and you lost because their pet cast. There's no skill involved in that whatsoever. It is entirely RNG. So I think Maycast definitely definitely need to be reworked, if not just completely banned from PvP because of how broken they are. Now, I think Maycast auras are also very overpowered, but they're not as detrimental as, for example, Maycast Shatter or Maycast Enfeeble. But I think in general, Maycasts need to really be adjusted or just completely removed from PvP. Like I said before, I do understand why people are in favor for turn-based. You know, being second is not fun, especially when you're up against an ice or fire or just a school that can just spam you down or just has the upper hand because of how the balancing works right now. But I don't think it is the solution for the game. I will obviously support whatever decision KI makes, and I will support the community no matter what, as long as the choices made by KI are backed by, you know, logic, reasoning, and the community's feedback, that our voices are heard. I will, you know, continue to upload PvP videos and play the game, all that, even when turn-based comes around. But I really do think that as the game stands right now, it is not ready for turn-based at all. So I think a lot more changes need to be made. Like I said, I think it would be huge if KingsIsle would add rewards to the test realm, you know, that would transfer over to the main game based on how many matches you could do. They could even make it, you know, with increasing levels. So for example, like 1 match you get this, 5 matches this, 10, 25, 50, 100, etc. Because people would grind that and it would give them more data and people would be more informed. It's easy to say, oh, I love turn-based because I hate going second, or it's easy to say, you know, oh, I hate turn-based, but you've never tried it. Until you actually try it firsthand, you really can't have an accurate opinion on it, because what's on paper and what's reality are two completely different things. Something might look fair and balanced on paper, but then you bring it to the live game and you find all these ways of just beating around the bush and, you know, just finding ways to exploit it. So I think that turn-based isn't necessarily bad for the game, even though I feel a game like Wiz doesn't have enough variety in terms of, you know, the variety within a specific school to support a mode like turn-based. But I do understand why the game is shifting in that direction and why a lot of people are advocating for it. I think that shads need to be absolutely reworked as well. I think that a shad lock would be a fantastic addition to the game. For example, if you Shrike, you can't do shads in Shrike, or, you know, if you get a shad, you can't get a shad for X many rounds, whether it be three rounds or whatever. Or once you use a shad, you can't use a shad for X many rounds. I think those would be great additions to the game. Obviously, it's difficult to do, and you have to think about how that would work if you made it universal, because, you know, if you do that, if there's a shadow lock on an aggressive school like Storm, that's obviously much more detrimental. A school like Ice can afford to not spam shads, even though they spam Weaver, but they can afford to tank the game longer, whereas Storm, they're all about being aggressive and offensive. So it would be difficult to implement, but I do think shads need to be reworked completely in PvP, regardless of whether it's turn-based or not. Most people I've talked to, it's really about what you see as the root of the problem. The people that are in favor of turn-based see that the root of the problem is the inherent disadvantage of going second, while most people who are in favor of the current system think that the root of the problem is shads and certain cards that do double value, and also just, you know, the current balancing of the game with spells like Weaver and Ifrit, which I think both need to be seriously nerfed with their utility, you know. Some of the suggestions that I've made in the past is, for example, to keep the current system but do a diminishing resist curve for the person going second. So what that would mean is basically the person going second gets an extra 50 resist the first round, then 40% the second round, 30, 20, 10 until 0, and then it's evened out. Or something like the person going second gets a free round, like they get to do 2 things their first turn or something like that. So obviously it's difficult to implement, and yes, you know, it might be different for a school that's offensive going second like Storm versus a defensive school like Ice, but I think there's other things that they could have tested out that they never did. You know, they just went from 0 to 100 from the current system to turn-based, and I understand, you know, I'm glad and I'm happy that they're trying to change the current PvP system and make it better and more fair for everyone. But like I said, I don't think that turn-based is the ideal solution, even though I will continue to support whatever the devs do and the community, as long as it's based in logic, reasoning, and experience, you know. Because like I said, it's one thing to say, oh, turn-based sucks, but you've never tried it, or to say turn-based is great, I hate going second, but you've never done a game of turn-based in your life. So I think it's really important for KI to implement some kind of reward system to the test realm. I'm going to keep advocating for it and trying to contact them, but I definitely think that you guys should, you know, reach out to them and explain your side of the story as well, and, you know, how you feel about the whole situation. Obviously, be respectful, okay? Be respectful, but it's good to be vocal. So, you know, don't complain or trash talk, or say really mean things. But at the same time, it is important to be vocal, so explain how you feel, but be respectful, and that's really all you can do. I think I covered just about everything I wanted to in this video. I know there's a lot of stuff, and there might have been some things that I missed out. Let me know in the comments below if I did. I just want to say that I don't think that turn-based is the solution for the game, even though, like I said, I will continue to support whatever happens. I think that turn-based is just too formulaic and procedural as the game stands now. It will just create no variety within matches, and I understand you might think, oh, that's how it is now, you just spam shads, but like I said, it's really where you see the root of the problem, whether you think it's the inherent disadvantage of being second, or whether you think it's shads or other things in the game. Now, obviously, you might think both have a problem. You might think, oh, shads need to be reworked, and also being second is a disadvantage. But like I said, I think that the current system is better, as flawed as it is and in need of work as it is. I don't think that turn-based is necessarily the solution. Either way, I think there needs to be changes to a lot of the spells that are in the game, and also balancing of the different schools. So we'll see how things go. I definitely want to see more testing, and just see how the game continues to flourish and grow in the future, and how the PvP community will be affected by this. But you can't really tell until you've tried it yourself and we see how it affects the live realm. So I really hope that they add a reward system to the test realm, so that people will be more incentivized to test out matches and see it firsthand. I would really love to hear what you guys have to say about it. If you want to leave a comment down below explaining how you feel about it, I will read and respond to every single comment. I love to hear what people have to say about it, and I really just want to open up the discussion for both sides, for people to explain the pros and the cons, why they're in favor or against it. And like I said, just open a friendly, respectful discussion where we can just talk about our problems with the game and concerns and what we want for the future. I think everybody should give turn-based PvP a try, regardless of how they feel about it. If you want to join my Discord server, it's in the description below. I would be happy to talk with you guys more one-on-one if you'd like. I'm also going to be, streaming every day like I am, but I'm going to continue to talk about it during streams, having discussions with the viewers and all that good stuff. So definitely come check that out if you want even more content. And yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for the absolutely insane support that I've received recently on Twitch. I didn't expect to, just gain such a following and build a community like that, and I can't thank you guys enough, and I love you guys. So thank you for everything. I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from, and know that really I just want what's best for the community and the longevity of this game. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I'd love to hear your feedback, so just message me on Discord or leave a comment down below. Share the video with your friends, help open up discussion. Come through to the Twitch streams if you want to talk about it more live and all that good stuff. So thanks again for everything. You guys are awesome, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.